Have you ever said something and felt the air around you change? As if your words didn't just echo, but landed somewhere. There's a belief in ancient Japan called Kodama, the idea that every word carries a spirit, a silent force that shapes reality, not just poetry, not just folklore, but a philosophy rooted in everyday life. And maybe that's why the Japanese speak with such care, such intention, because to them, words aren't just sound. They're seeds. Seeds that grow gardens of healing, of strength, of love, or weeds of regret and pain. In this video, we're not just exploring beautiful phrases. We're stepping into a world where a single sentence can change the way you see failure, love, patience, and even yourself. So if you've been feeling lost, overwhelmed, or just looking for a bit more meaning, these 10 timeless Japanese sayings might be exactly what your heart needs to hear today. Let's begin. In a quiet forest in rural Japan, there's a tree no one dares to cut, not because it's protected by law, but because it's believed to be alive, in a very spiritual way. The villagers say a Kodama lives there, a spirit that echoes every word spoken beneath its branches. They believe if you speak gently, the forest will protect you, but if you speak with anger, the trees will remember. To us, this might sound like folklore, but in Japan, it's something deeper, a reflection of how much they believe in the power of words. Kodama isn't just a myth, it's a philosophy, that every word you speak leaves a trace, not only on others, but also on yourself. Think about that for a second. Have you ever heard someone say something cruel, and even years later, you still remember how it made you feel? Or maybe someone once said something kind to you on a terrible day, and it stuck with you like a lantern in the dark. The Japanese understand this deeply. They treat words like seeds. You plant anger, you grow conflict. You plant kindness, you grow connection. It's why, in many traditional tea ceremonies, silence is just as important as speech. Every word is weighed. Every phrase carries intention. And perhaps it's something we've forgotten in our fast-paced world, where we post before we pause, speak before we reflect. But imagine if we lived like Kodama were listening. If we chose words not just to fill the silence, but to plant something meaningful in someone else's day. Because here's the truth. Words don't just communicate, they create. They create relationships. They create beliefs. They create our experience of the world. So the next time you speak, whether to a stranger, a loved one, or yourself, remember, you're not just talking, you're planting. And the garden you grow tomorrow depends on what you whisper today. And if words can shape reality, then what happens when we repeat just one small phrase, day after day, like a quiet chant? That's where the real magic begins. Let's talk about the power of consistency. Every morning, rain or shine, a man in his 70s walks the same path in a small town just outside Osaka. Same time, same rhythm, same old sneakers. He doesn't walk fast. He doesn't listen to music. He just walks. Silently, purposefully. One day, a curious neighbor finally asked, "Why do you do this every day?" The man smiled and said, "Because 10 years ago, my doctor told me I had 5 years left. I've been walking ever since." That's Japanese strength. Not loud, not flashy, but relentless. There's a Japanese proverb that says, "Consistency is strength." In the West, we often admire big wins, overnight success, sudden breakthroughs. But in Japan, it's the daily, almost invisible progress that's most respected. Imagine water dripping onto a rock. One drop doesn't matter. 10 drops? Still nothing. But over time, that water shapes stone. That's how the Japanese see progress. Not as something you chase with intensity, but something you become through quiet repetition. It's in how they train in martial arts, doing the same kata thousands of times. It's in how they prepare tea, mindfully, respectfully, every single day. And it's something we can all learn from. Maybe you're trying to get healthier. Maybe you want to write that book. Or maybe you're just trying to get through a difficult season in your life. You don't need to do it all today. You just need to do a little, and then do it again tomorrow. because 100 days of nothing equals nothing, but 100 days of small effort builds something that lasts. So next time you feel like giving up because results aren't coming fast enough, remember the old man walking, remember the dripping water, and remind yourself, you don't have to be extreme, you just have to be consistent. But even when we're consistent, life will knock us down. And when it does, the question isn't, will I fall? It's, will I rise? Let's talk about a phrase that defines the heart of Japanese resilience. It was March 11, 2011. In the small coastal town of Rikuzentakata, a woman stood in front of what used to be her family's restaurant. Now, it was nothing but rubble. The tsunami had taken almost everything: her home, her business, and most painfully, her son. And yet, just 2 years later, that same woman reopened a tiny food stall on the same street. When asked why, she said, "Because someone has to feed the people who stayed." That is the spirit of this Japanese proverb. Fall down 7 times, stand up 8. The numbers aren't meant to be literal, they're symbolic. A reminder that no matter how many times life knocks us down, what matters is that we rise one more time than we fall. It's a phrase rooted in Buddhist philosophy, where suffering is part of life, but so is resilience. And in Japan, this isn't just about big tragedies. It's in the small things too. Failing a test, losing a job, going through heartbreak. Each fall chips away at our confidence, but each time we rise, we rebuild it stronger. It's not about being fearless, it's about being faithful to yourself, to your values, to what you believe is worth standing back up for. Even in the West, we've seen this. After wars, after loss, after illness, we rebuild, we recover, we rise. But here's the key lesson. Resilience isn't loud, it's quiet. It's choosing to stand when no one's clapping. And sometimes we don't rise alone. We lean on others. We borrow strength. We crawl before we walk again. But we do rise. So if you're down today, let this be your 8th time. Stand up, not perfectly, not all at once, just enough. Because that one more time, it always matters. But what if you're in a rush to move forward? What if life demands results now? Well, the Japanese have a surprising answer. If you're in a hurry, take the long way. Let's talk about why shortcuts may not be what they seem. Centuries ago, during the Muromachi period, a poet gave a piece of advice to weary travelers heading to Kyoto. If you're in a hurry, take the long way. It sounds backwards, doesn't it? But the story goes like this. Soldiers and messengers often crossed Lake Biwa on a narrow wooden plank laid across boats. It was the fastest route until a gust of wind came. One wrong step and everything would be lost. So the poet urged them, take the bridge, take the longer path. You'll get there safer and often faster. Fast forward to today, and we still chase shortcuts. Lose weight fast, get rich quick, go viral overnight. But how often do those shortcuts set us back? Take the story of Tom and Linda, a couple in their 60s who had drifted apart over the years. After retirement, they thought a 2-week cruise would fix everything. It didn't. Instead, they took the long road. Weekly walks, honest conversations, couples counseling, learning how to listen again. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't fast, but it worked. Because sometimes the long way, the patient, intentional way, isn't a delay. It's a detour to something deeper, something more lasting. The Japanese understand this deeply. From handcrafting kimonos to preparing tea, their culture honors process over speed. They know that rushing often leads to redoing. And so, this phrase isn't just about travel, it's about life. Are you rushing to heal from grief? Are you hurrying to find love, or success, or peace? Maybe, just maybe, the longer path is the truer one, because the goal isn't just to arrive, it's to arrive whole. And as we walk that long road, step by step, we may wonder if all the effort is worth it. But in Japan, there's a powerful reminder. Effort is always rewarded. Let's explore what that really means. He wasn't the strongest. He wasn't the fastest, but he became the greatest hitter in Japanese baseball history. Sadaharu Oh, a name etched not just in record books, but in the hearts of a nation. He once said, "Effort is always rewarded. If it wasn't, it simply wasn't effort yet." That line, so simple, yet so unforgiving. You see, Oh didn't rely on talent. He trained harder than anyone. Hours of swings, day after day, even after becoming a legend. And here's the lesson. Effort doesn't always show results immediately. But real effort, the kind that comes from the heart, always leaves a mark. In the West, we often define success by outcomes. Did it work? Did it sell? Did you win? But in Japan, effort itself is sacred. A person who gives their all, regardless of result, is worthy of respect. There's even a word for it, ganbaru, to persist with purpose, especially when things get tough. Take Mrs. Elaine, a retired schoolteacher from Ohio. At 65, she decided to learn Japanese calligraphy. It took her 3 years to draw a single character to her teacher's satisfaction. 3 years? 1 stroke. But when she finally did, she cried. Not because of the praise, but because of the effort it took to get there. That's the quiet reward. And maybe that's something we all need to remember. When the diet isn't working, when the business feels stuck, when the healing takes longer than we thought, it doesn't mean we've failed. It just means we're still in the middle of the effort. So keep going. Because in the end, the reward isn't just the result. The reward is who you become along the way. But what happens when you are talented? When you do have something powerful to show the world? In Japan, the wisest don't shout. They say, "The talented hawk hides its claws." Let's explore the surprising strength of quiet confidence. In a quiet dojo nestled between the rice fields of rural Japan, there was an old man who taught martial arts. He never raised his voice. He never demonstrated flashy moves. In fact, to outsiders, he didn't seem impressive at all. Until one day, a young hot-headed student challenged him during practice, mocking the elder's age and stillness. The old man simply nodded. In less than 2 seconds, the student was on the floor, speechless, breathless, humbled. No drama, no noise, just mastery. The students would later say, "We never saw his strength until we needed it." That's the meaning behind the Japanese proverb. The talented hawk hides its claws. It's not about being weak, it's about being in control. In a world that rewards noise, Japan values quiet power. True skill, true confidence, doesn't need to scream. In fact, the most competent people often go unnoticed because they're not performing for applause. They're too focused on the work itself. You see it in artisans who spend decades perfecting a single craft. You see it in nurses, caregivers, and grandmothers, quietly holding families together without asking for credit. You see it in veterans who've seen the worst and still choose to be kind. In the West, we often confuse confidence with volume, but the Japanese remind us, the strongest presence isn't always the loudest voice. Sometimes it's the stillness in the room, the pause before a wise word, the person who waits and listens. So if you feel unseen, if you're not the loudest or most outspoken, don't mistake that for weakness. Your power doesn't need to be on display to be real. Because just like the hawk, when the moment comes, you'll know how to fly. But what if the problem isn't about hiding our strength, but rather the size of our perspective? Sometimes we don't even realize we're looking at the world from the bottom of a well. Let's talk about the frog who never saw the ocean. There's a story in ancient Asian philosophy about a little frog who lived at the bottom of a well. He looked up every day and thought, "This is the whole sky." One day, a sea turtle passed by and mentioned the ocean. The frog laughed. "There's no such thing," he said. "Nothing could be bigger than my well." This tale inspired a well-known Japanese saying, "The frog in the well doesn't know the great ocean." At first, it sounds like a fable for children, but the older we get, the more it hits home. Because let's be honest, we all have our own wells. Maybe it's the town we grew up in, The beliefs we inherited, the news channels we watch, the routines we never question, they shape how we see the world, and sometimes they limit it. Take Richard, an 82-year-old retired electrician from Nebraska. He never traveled outside his county. Didn't see the need. But when his granddaughter invited him to visit her in Tokyo, something shifted. He went reluctantly. He came back transformed. He said, "It felt like I'd been looking through a straw my whole life. And suddenly, someone handed me a window." That's the power of perspective. And in Japanese culture, this proverb isn't just about geography, it's about humility. Because the moment we assume we know it all, we stop learning. We stop listening. We stop growing. But when we admit, maybe my well isn't the whole world, that's when real wisdom begins. So the question isn't, have you seen the ocean? It's, are you willing to climb out of the well? Because out there, beyond your comfort, beyond what you think you know, is a world vast, complex, beautiful, and waiting to show you who you can become. And when you do step into that bigger world, when you meet someone new, when you share a fleeting moment, remember one final lesson. Each encounter is once in a lifetime. Let's talk about why every moment matters more than we think. In a quiet tea room in Kyoto, there's a phrase written in elegant brushstrokes on the wall. Ichigo ichi, one moment, one meeting. It means, this moment, this encounter, will never happen again. Not in this exact way, not with the same breath, the same glance, the same heartbeats. And so, it is sacred. The Japanese live by this. In tea ceremonies, in daily greetings, in how they treat even strangers, with full attention and respect. Because they know, nothing lasts forever. And that's exactly what makes it precious. But life isn't always gentle. Sometimes it tramples us. Loss, illness, regret. We feel flattened, like grass under heavy feet. And yet, there's another phrase whispered in Japanese wisdom. Even trampled grass can bloom. It reminds us that beauty isn't born from perfection. It's born from resilience, from moments that broke us and rebuilt us differently, from pain that softened our hearts, not hardened them, like scars that tell stories, like laughter that returns after tears. In the end, these two ideas, Ichigo ichi and trampled grass, are not opposites, they're companions. They teach us that every moment is a chance to be kind, to heal, to love, to rise. Because whether it's a smile from a stranger, a call from an old friend, or the sound of wind through the trees, this is it. This is the moment. This is the meeting. And it will never come again. So live it fully. Speak with kindness. Look someone in the eyes. Hold a hand a second longer. Plant the right words. And one day, you'll find yourself in a garden you didn't even realize you were growing. So maybe the Japanese aren't just sharing beautiful sayings. Maybe they're giving us a way back to what matters. Not later, not tomorrow. Now. If even one of these phrases stayed with you, let it take root. And if you know someone who needs to hear these words, share this video with them. Because the right words at the right time can change everything.